Hello. You see over my shoulder that the sermon series we're going to talk about this month is called Fireside Chats. And so my question to you as we begin is, do you know, by showing of hands, what that's a reference to? Oh, man, that's a smaller group than at 9 o'clock. We might need to do middle school history again. Maybe we should focus on that a little. I'm just playing. Fireside Chats is a reference to FDR's presidency. He was of the belief that it was important for him to speak directly to the American people. He said so because he thought that oftentimes if he spoke to the press, it would get filtered through their unadulterated bias. That's his quote. So in case you thought newspaper bias was a new problem, our president in the 1930s and 40s founded a series of radio chats in order to get past that. And so he spoke directly to the American people and did a series of many of them over that time, that 11-year period. And so he would sit in a room in the White House and he would prepare a speech, anywhere from 15 to 35 minutes or so, and he would speak directly to the American people. I listened to his first Fireside Chat this week because I thought it'd be really good to get a sense of the tone of how that was. And it reminded me a whole lot of It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, coming right off of Christmas, I'm sure many of you watched that this last month. It's one of my favorite movies. I love that story. And there was a lot of that tone and tenor to it. This first one he did, 1933, he called On the Banking Crisis. On the Banking Crisis. And he actually laid out for the American people how banks worked, so that when they reopened the bank after the latest crash, there would be an understanding that they could trust their local bank. And he said this interesting line that banks don't just receive your money and then put it in a vault downstairs waiting for you to use it. They reinvest it in mortgages and loans, trying to keep the calm at a minimal so when the banks open, people didn't just try to take all their money out. He kept warning them, now this is a throwback to yesteryear, that it is not safer to put your money under a mattress than in a bank. I thought that was really interesting. I'm hoping none of you use mattresses as your banks these days, but kind of a throwback to yesteryear. And so he set this vision for the country, helping them understand their role in keeping our banking system and our finances secure moving forward, and a reminder of how banks work. And so he talked directly to the American people so that they can begin to move away from the stock market crash, the bank failure, and the Great Depression, and start moving towards something different and stronger together. And he would do this over and over and over. He talked to them after Pearl Harbor, and he explained war decisions during World War II. And he just talked directly to the people about what he was working on and what his cabinet was thinking about and why they were doing what they were doing. And so I wanted to spend the next month doing something fairly similar with you all. I suspect we're at a similar juncture to that. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I've been thinking, why I've been thinking, what I'm hearing from pastoral staff, and just different ways I'm listening, helping us move towards the future. And I thought that starting out 2019 would be a great way to do that. I imagine that many of you have begun resolutions, right? How many of you have made the decision to lose weight in 2019? A few of you, that's really good. How many of you had made that resolution a week ago and have already lost it? There's a couple. Okay, yeah. Let's just be honest, right? So it's a good time for us to think about patterns. This is what we do. We also have, of course, the State of the Union every January, where the president in our culture gets up and talks about where we're at and where we're going and what's trying to be accomplished. And so January is a good time in our culture to take a step back and say, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What's going on? And I want to do exactly that for you. And so I'm going to lift up the veil a little bit to maybe some things that you don't get to see on a day-to-day basis, and try to do a little bit of work of spending this time explaining to you what's going on to make sure that you're in the know. And so I've been here as pastor between 8 and 9 months now, and I really wanted to take that time to be a listener, to understand what's going on. I didn't want to make the mistake of coming in and changing things and shifting things and making culture feel upset and different here. Quite the opposite. I wanted to learn DNA of this place and character and personality and who you all understood yourself to be, and what was going on here that was good. And I wanted to be real careful to listen and to observe and to watch, which I feel is a very necessary piece of leadership. Let me explain to you why. Following a 17-year pastor who was very successful and did amazing things isn't always the easiest thing to do. That's because there's a culture that is created that is expected. And so it's not wise for me to come in and just insert my personality on here and expect that you're all going to just do what I think we should do. That would have felt like chaos to everyone and wouldn't have done anyone any good. And so I wanted to learn and watch. And at a certain point, it begins to feel like I'm working on a tightrope just a little bit. You see, if I lean too much to the left, trying all sorts of new things, starting all sorts of new ministries, beginning new things, ending old things, doing what's been successful for me from before, eventually I'm going to fall to my own demise to the left. If on the other side, on the right, I just say, no, this is a good church, we're not going to do anything, we're going to try to preserve, we're going to try to keep, we're going to try to make sure it just keeps going the way it's going without any alterations whatsoever, that would also be a problem, because the things that were successful in 2005 and 2010, 2015 were at least successful in part because it happened at the right era and the right time in our church's history and our culture's history, and we need to constantly be prepared and moving with the times. And so this first year has kind of been walking on that tightrope, not trying to change too much, but also starting to address and deal with things that need addressing before they could get a bit out of control. And so I've really started with the pastoral staff, working with them, talking with them. If you've read the Bible very much, you know you can't get very far without there being talk of sheep and shepherds, right? The shepherd then becomes a metaphor for pastor as well. In fact, the word pastor is directly related to the idea of shepherd. And we're told even by Jesus that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. And so collectively as pastors, we are the shepherds of this place, if you want to continue the metaphor for Scripture. And so I wanted to make sure that we were in sync, on the same page, talking the same language, sharing the same goals, telling the same stories, all on the same page moving forward. And so we have a weekly staff meeting on Tuesday mornings. I don't know if you know that or not, but we get together every single Tuesday and talk about what's going on, what's coming up. We critique past services. We share stories and victories of what's going on. And one of the first things we did together was work through a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I asked all of our pastors, full-time, part-time, paid, unpaid, I asked them all to fill out something in this book. It's just a small business book, The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. It's a really interesting book. And there's a test in there, a quiz for you to kind of air where you think your team is. And so I just asked them to do it. And we found that there was some minor dysfunction, nothing to be concerned about, nothing to be afraid about, but little things like, do we feel comfortable bringing conflict to the table? Do we feel comfortable sharing our opinion with one another? Things like that. And we found that maybe there's just a couple little places that we can improve. And so we've worked really, really hard at all of us being able to come to the table and share what we're hearing, what we're thinking, and receive it as an opportunity to grow and not a criticism of each other. And I think we've done some good work there. And I really believe that if our pastoral team is cohesive and together and enjoys each other, that whatever the flavor of our pastoral team is what becomes the flavor of our church. And so if there was division or anger or even just casual separateness there, that would sort of seep into the culture of our church as well. And so we've been really intentional about building our relationships there and having fun with one another and working well with one another and understanding how our ministries affect the ministries of other people in the church and really trying to build a cohesive team there. And I think we've done a really great job. I can tell you that the pastors we have on staff are just excellent, and we've done a lot of really, really great work finding ourselves on the same team. I think that's really important for us. And so from there, working with them, I asked them all to present to me a group of people in the church that worked with them in their different areas of ministry that they thought they could present to me as a vision team. And so I began to build what's called a vision team. And I wanted to do this in particular because I thought it was important, especially in my leadership style and my personality, to listen from the grassroots up as we begin to vision and move forward. We've got our church board, right? And we do all sorts of business and all this kind of stuff. I didn't want it to be the church board. So I asked, hey, who are some of the people who teach Sunday school? Who are some of the people who are on the music team? Who are some of the people who are teenage leaders? Who are some of the people who, just on and on and on and on, and kind of took one or two people from all over the church, people who don't necessarily always feel like they have a say in the church. And I wanted to develop sort of a grassroots conversation from a different angle that would help facilitate and push us in the direction of the vision that God is calling us to. And so we developed just a group of about 30 people, not a whole lot, and hoped that they would be representative of the church. People from different genders, people from different ministries, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people from different ages. We have people in there who are older, and we have people who are younger. And we meet once a quarter or so, and I ask them questions, and they give me feedback. And I even made them read like a 250-page book, which, they were only so happy about, if I'm honest with you. I wanted to just give you a sense of who some of these people are. And so we had the people in the first service stand up. But if you've been working with me on that team and you're in this service, would you just stand real quick just so the people in here could look around and see some of the faces? There were a lot more in the first service. I think we might have goofed that up a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, this is a great group of people who've been helping me. And you can see there's some diversity there. You guys can sit down. Thank you. And so one of the things that I think I learned about Kevin, who was my predecessor, and I have nothing bad to say about Kevin. Kevin and I are friends. We get along very well. Kevin operated in a bit of a top-down leadership style. He would spend time in prayer and sense what God wanted to do, and then lay the vision out to you and ask you to follow. And you did, because you're a great people. That's not necessarily how I'm wired. It's not necessarily how I operate. I think it's just a slightly different sort of way. For me, I want to work with the grassroots of the church and hear from our people and hear what God is calling our people to and hearing what God is shaping our imaginations to be. And I want to kind of bring that to the table and bring some clarity to it. And then I can be the champion of the vision. I can speak the vision, but I want there to be ownership before I cast vision. And I like to see it come from our people, because I believe that God is at work in your heart and in your life, and that you see things from angles that I don't always see, and that I'm not always right. And so having you guys tell me sometimes through different avenues in different places what you're sensing God is doing gives me an opportunity to collect all of that data and then hopefully bring some clarity to it and present it and say, hey, this is what I think collectively God is calling us to do and be. And so that's a big part of why I haven't gotten up here yet in this year and said, this is our next big initiative. This is what we're going to do. This is who we're going to be. Because following someone for 17 years and walking into a church that I really believe in and I think is really great, it just doesn't strike me as wise for me to tell you who you're going to be. Instead, it strikes me as wise to sit and listen. And so I've invested a lot of time in relationships, trying to meet people at different parties and different small groups and different leadership groups that are different sub areas. And so on Sundays, I'll go sit in the children's huddle. You may have seen me there before, or music team end of the year parties, and just on and on and on and on, trying to make connections with as many people as possible so that I'm listening and hearing and getting to know you, because it seems to me that if we're going to move forward together, it's best done out of what God is calling us and equipping us and giving us to be, rather than for me to move here from 400 or 500 miles away and expect that what I did there will work here and that you're just naturally going to follow me. So I'm trying to create this opportunity of relationship where you learn to trust me and learn to get to know me, and I learn what your story is and what your history is and what you're thinking about and what God is calling you to, and then trying to bring some clarity to it that way. Does that make sense? Okay, great. I'm glad. And so I just want to walk through some strengths and opportunities from my own observation of being here. Now, I mean, I can kind of see the 1 year mark from here. It's a little fuzzy, but I can see it. And so it seems like a good time to talk about just what my observations are and what I sense is really great about this place. Now, I had someone come up to me in the last service and tell me I didn't name all the great things about this place. That is true. But I also understand you guys have a football game to get to and really don't want me talking till 2 or 3 about all the great things. Do I have that right? Okay, I thought so. All right. So if I don't name your thing, that's not because I don't think it's great or whatever. In fact, these are attempts to be more generalized strengths than local or specific strengths, okay? So first one. This, to me, is the biggest strength of Crossroads, and it's an easy one to overlook, okay? This is it. Number one, people seem to like to be here. Amen. Yeah, right? I don't know if you've ever been a part of a church before that you kind of dreaded going to on Sunday morning, but those churches exist. And it's hard to overcome that. It's hard to change that culture. It just is. And there's many reasons. It's not always even anyone's fault that can happen. But for the most part, I observe that people like to be here. And as often as schedule allows, they'll come to midweek things and meetings and events. I mean, we just did this Christmas coffee house, which was super cool. And I mean, we were like throwing chairs up aisles, and I mean, it was wild. People seem to like to be here, and I don't think we should take that for granted. That's a huge strength that we have in this church, one that I'm very thankful for. The second one, I have 9 strengths, just so you know. You want to follow along and figure out when the preacher's going to be done. Number two, we have a great small group ministry that particularly creates good connections. I just sat with someone this week who told me she would go here regardless of small groups. But it was small groups that invited her into leadership opportunities and connection. It was getting to know people outside of the Sunday morning experience that caused her really to move from attender to like stakeholder who wants to see this place succeed, because now she believes in people, and so she serves and she's a part. I mean, really great person. And so small groups are a great opportunity for us to get to know each other. It's a great opportunity for us to find relationships that keep us coming back. It's a great opportunity to not only grow closer to Christ, I mean, that's a huge part of it, but really find that you're a part of what's happening here. So if you've not tried small group before, I really suggest it, because I've been involved in like 2 small groups now, and they were super awesome, and I mean, really a game changer, really, really a game changer, even just for my wife and I getting to know people. And so I highly, highly recommend that. Number 3, children and youth ministries are really strong here. We do 0 to 18 super well, really, really well. I have people tell me all the time that they started coming here because their kids liked coming here. And if you have kids or you've had kids, you know how important it is that when you say to your children, we're going to church today, that they don't say, I don't wanna. Oh, that's hard to overcome, right? But when you say we're going to church today, and they're like, great, I love church. That is a huge asset to families being a part of the church. And I hear over and over and over people saying, I love Crossroads because I don't have to fight with my kids to go to church. They love it here. That's a huge gift that we have in this church. Number 4, we have a lot of musical talent. Right? I mean, it's crazy the amount of musical talent we had. I just mentioned the Christmas coffee house we did, and I was amazed at how many people got up there that aren't even a part of our Sunday morning worship team on the regular, and just were awesome. I mean, there are churches, and you know, it's hard to be a small church, but there are churches out there that are praying that God would send them just one piano player, right? And I mean, that's the reality. And on the other hand, God has blessed us with just team after team of incredibly gifted people. And every single Sunday, I know that when the music starts, it's going to be a quality worship experience. And I'm very thankful for that. And number 5, that leads into this one. I believe we have good Sunday morning worship services. From the start to the end, I believe that there's quality. And so I mentioned earlier that we get together on Tuesdays as a staff, And we sit down every week and we walk through the worship service the week before, trying to make sure that we're continuing to push forward towards excellence. And very rarely do we have any big catastrophes. Most of the time, we're just nitpicking towards excellence, which is a great thing. I mean, you may recall a couple weeks ago that we lit the Advent wreath on fire during this service. That happens sometimes, but generally speaking, we're not at a catastrophe level like that. Generally speaking, we look back at Sunday and say, hey, it went pretty well. It went pretty well. And so that's a real blessing as well. Number 6, our church in its DNA has a willingness to try new things. I think that's a huge one as well, the willingness to try new things. I heard a sermon once, one of my favorite sermons I've ever heard in my life. I'm not going to tell the whole sermon. You're welcome. Football, I know. But the basic idea of the sermon was he described the founding of a hospital and how important it was to heal people. And then as the hospital started getting more and more of a reputation, they started memorializing everything. Everything became a sacred cow, remembering the good old days of the hospital, until at the end of the extended metaphor, the place was no longer a hospital, it was a museum, right? It's a powerful image, right, to move from hospital to museum. But many churches accidentally make that leap. In fact, I was once at a large Nazarene church. It's a good Nazarene church, but it was a large church, and the youth pastor brought me into this room right next to the exit to the sanctuary. And he says, Tim, what do you think of these couches? I said, they're beautiful couches. And he says, I know. No one's allowed to sit in them. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, they spent so much money that they don't want people in there spilling on it. Well, that seems like a waste of money then, doesn't it? But yet it's easy to fall into that space, right? Where you try to memorialize everything and everything's a sacred cow and everything needs to be protected. I don't get that sense around here at all. I generally find that if people think we can get better, if we can improve, if we can maximize our resources, if we could reach new people, hey, let's give it a try. And that's a beautiful place to be as a church, willing to keep giving things a try in order to get better, to reach more people, in order to have more quality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really deeply appreciate that about this church, a willingness to try new things. Number 7, we have a really strong leadership board. I learned that in my interview, even before I became your pastor. The district superintendent, Dr. Bowser, who I'm sure many of you have met before, he told me, he just kept saying, oh, they're really sharp, Tim. They're really sharp. I mean, he scared me, really. So I was a little intimidated. But sure enough, I learned we have great leadership in this church. I mean, just people who are passionate about this place and this people, who do a great job overseeing things like finances and building and plan and ministry and stewardship and all of that kind of stuff. We have a deep pool of people who are just really, really great and represent you at a grassroots level very, very well. And so I appreciate having such strong lay leadership. Number 8, we're a giving people. It's amazing to me. Every time I recount this story, I told it again in the first service and my mind blew. It's probably going to happen again. But this last year was kind of wild in a lot of ways. First of all, we had gone a while without paying the senior pastor position, so that gives you an opportunity to build up a reserve. And so I got here and this building started falling apart. I don't know what that's all about. But I'm being a little facetious, but the roof on that side of the church needed to be replaced. No joke, on a Sunday morning, someone came in here kind of panicked and said, Tim, you've got to go to the nursery. And I walked up to the nursery, and Chris Beck was there with buckets. Just water was pouring through our ceiling. And we had known we had to start planning for a roof. But, when you see your children's ministry assistant with a trash can up to the ceiling, it's time. Now is the moment to replace the roof. We have reached that moment. And so we had to do that. We had 4 or 5 air conditioning catastrophes over the summer this year. We replaced our bathrooms down here. I hope you've been in there and seen how beautiful they are. But we just came to a recognition that they were starting to get a little dingy. They'd been that way for 15 years. They smelled a little funny, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was meant to be a locker room bathroom, not a church bathroom, right? I mean, that was the intent. So that needed to be done. We've done some maintenance around the church, all this kind of stuff. And what's amazing to me, in all of that we've done, I could just go on and on and on and on. In all that we've done, we have paid cash for every last project. Isn't that amazing? And so not only have we paid cash for all of that, we never once had to come to you and ask that you support these things that needed to be done. It's all been done out of regular giving, tithes, and offering. And so we've maintained all of our ministries. We haven't cut anything. We have added things. We've been very, very careful in a lot of ways. But all of the things that we did around here were all because you all are faithful in your giving and that you are supportive and you understand your role in sharing what God has given you for the sake of the church. So I just deeply appreciate that. And then moving into this fiscal year, we'll talk about this more at the annual meeting, but we continue to have a reserve. We didn't even drain that all the way down to zero with all of this. And so, so in the midst of big things that we needed to do, some of them very unexpected, God blessed us in incredible ways. And I want you to know that I don't take lightly how important your role is in that. And so I want to thank you for the way that you give. Then 9, this is my last major strength that I want to talk to today, and this is location. We have an unbelievable location, just incredible where we are situated. Right on the freeway, we're inside of Howard County, but we're right there next to 2 counties, kind of right in like a tri-county area. People from all over the county can get here easy. We're accessible. We're in the middle of a booming neighborhood development left and right. Every time I drive to church, which is like 6 or 7 times a week, there's a new house that's been built and a new sign for a new development, right? This is incredible. This is great. We are right where things are happening. And I believe deeply at my very core that we're not here by happenstance. God has placed us here. There's something about this corner, that traffic circle, this piece of land that God has delivered to us and asked us to do something with. Right? And so we have a prime, exciting location. So I'm interested and excited to keep praying. God, why here? What is it about being in this place that you want us to maximize? What is it about being in this place that you want us to utilize? What is it about being in this place that is specific to the call that we are to be as a people? And I'm excited about the answers that I start thinking of when I think of that, because this is a great location, not only in the Baltimore metro area, but really in America. This is a cool place to be at this time in our history. It really is. And so we got a great location. So I have just a couple opportunities I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap up. And this should go pretty quick. The first one, this is really number one in every sort of way. This opportunity is so near and dear to my heart. And if I just confess to you, really what I hear God reminding me of constantly. Number one is this, that I would like to see moving forward conversion growth and not just transfer growth. Does that make sense what I mean by that? Transfer growth is great. Transfer growth means someone else is going to another church. It's not meeting their needs. They've just moved here. They've been a part of a Nazarene church, or they're just next door and they want to go to a church near to them, on and on and on and on. These are people who know Jesus and are looking for a church. We're glad to have them. We'll always welcome them to our church. Great. Have a seat. Be a part. We're glad to see you. But this is where my heart is moving forward. Is I want to see people of nominal faith or no faith radically find the love of Jesus. I want us to be an evangelistic church where people are going from not knowing Christ to knowing Christ and then following him on the path of discipleship. You can overlook, I think you could really, really overlook how that's not happening just by receiving Christians who need a new church. And you could say, we're growing. Look how much we're growing. But I really want to see people radically changed. And I'm going to need you to be a part of that. I'm going to need you to be a part of that. I could say this over and over, but it's kind of true. As soon as I shake someone's hand and they say, well, what do you do? And I say, I'm a pastor, they turn and they run. You want to see like world records for mile sprints. You should see what people do when I tell them I'm a pastor, right? But you guys have a very, very different story. You have coworkers and neighbors who aren't threatened by your job or your personality. And we need you really to think and pray about who God could lay on your heart. I can do the ministry. Jesse can do the ministry, right, Jesse? We can help. We can help you. We want to stand beside you. We want to walk alongside God's call in your life to be an evangelist for the sake of the kingdom. We can do the talking, but it'd be really great if you could pray that God would make you a fisher of men, that you could bring them in and we could stand beside you and minister to them and help you. But we need your help. We need this to become a passion of your heart as well, that we're not just a place that receives transfer growth, not just a transient place of people in and out, but that people who don't know Jesus come to know him in radical saving ways. That is my prayer moving forward. Number 2, I want to see prayer ministries develop around here. I'm not sure we're going to go anywhere without prayer. Prayer is a vitally important ministry. And so I would love to see groups form. And I can't just form them all. There's not enough of me to go around. And so I really need our lay people to catch visions for these kind of things and start them on their own and participate on them. And so some of the ideas that have just come into my mind of ways that we could continue adding prayer ministries here is perhaps a Tuesday night prayer ministry. I talked to Sienta about this week. Maybe there'd be people who'd be willing to come on Tuesday night and pray for the church, in the church. I thought about Sunday mornings. There's a lot of ways we could just pray on the day that we come here, right? I talked to the 9 o'clock service, and I suggested to them that maybe they could come at 8 or 8:30 and create a group who would pray for the 9 and the 11 o'clock service, walking throughout here, touching pews, chairs, going into classrooms where kids are and praying. Maybe as an 11 o'clock service, you'd be willing to go to the 9 o'clock service, not to be a part of the worship experience, but finding a quiet place in the church and just praying for the service that's happening at 9 o'clock through the service, praying that God would move, and God would speak, and God would do something big in the lives of those who are then, and then attend the 11 o'clock service as per usual. Maybe there'd be someone who wanted to start a Saturday night prayer ministry where once the church is set up and Elevate is out and all the stuff is done in a quiet service or a quiet church building, that they could just move through the whole building as a group, one by one, praying over classrooms and chairs and pews and praying that God would prepare this place for tomorrow, that his Spirit would be ready to receive us. These are just some different ideas, and there's many other opportunities, but maybe God is touching on your heart that you could be a part of starting or being a part of a start of a prayer ministry. I talked to Doreen. Doreen is at the welcome desk. If you have any interest in being a part of something like that, go and talk to her and say, I'm not committing to anything, but God stirred my heart a little bit. I think I could be a part of praying. We need people who are willing to commit to prayer, and I believe in corporate prayer. The scripture says where 2 or 3 are gathered, there God is in their midst. I think it's important that we be a praying people moving forward. Number 3, continue to emphasize and promote and help children's ministry. I mentioned before, I think it's one of our strengths, but even as our strength, we still often need more people and more resources. And I hear over and over and over that is the key entry point here at this particular church. That people say, we came, my kids loved children's, and we've stayed. And then that becomes a huge filtering, entering point for Jesse's ministry with the youth as well. That if we gather families in K through 6, the kids get excited then in middle school to move on and pass on to youth group. And so really, we've got to keep focusing on children's ministry. In any way that you can support or help or pray or volunteer would be vitally important for keeping the DNA of this place in place. Number 4, we need to go into our community and not just ask them to come to us. I think this is a fundamental change in the way American society is working. I mean, 200 years ago, if you wanted to be the best church in town, you built the biggest steeple, right? And so people would see it, and they would know where the church was, right? It was higher than all the buildings, all the houses. We've always had in mind in America this sort of attractional sort of thing, that if we do things right, if we do things well, if we put out good flyers and good pamphlets, and we get the word out, people will come. I'm afraid that the culture is changing just a little bit, that it's not so easy as attracting people all the time. We've got to find a missional DNA within us that we're willing to go to the places where the people in our community are at and find a way to be a presence there and invite them into relationship with Christ, or relationship to the church, and then invite them into this place. I'm afraid that's the way it's going to work moving forward as opposed to the other way around. A tractional model is super safe. Super safe. The missional model of going out and being in the community is a little more scary, but it's really where we're going to have to head as a church. I don't mean Crossroads. I mean churches, all of them in America. I'm really thinking the missional model is where we're headed. We're going to have to go to our communities, much like they do in missions across the world, right? Africa, South America, when they've started Christian stuff, they've had to find where the people are and tell them the story of Jesus. I think that's where we're headed here as well. Number 5, discipleship. And this is what I'm working with, really, with that vision team that I showed you earlier and with the pastors as well, is developing a plan and not just a program. Not just something that says, hey, here's what we do, come and join, but really an articulated way of saying, this is how we want to help you move from where you are now, whether that's no faith, nominal faith, fully devoted disciple of Christ, closer to Jesus. And make that a clear plan so that no matter where you're at, you understand what's next. You understand how to grow. You understand where opportunities are for you to grow nearer to Christ. We want to develop a discipleship plan that's an overarching vision in the church. Number 6, I've talked to a lot of people recently, very recently, about reading the Bible. People in our church who really want to understand the Bible and want to dig in and want to read, but really struggle to understand it. Really struggle to understand how to read it or how to look at it. And so I'm really hoping to develop new ministries in the coming days that help us learn to read the scripture so that no matter what our education past is, no matter if we went to Sunday school as a little boy or girl or not, we can pick up the Bible and read it, and it has meaning, that we understand what God is doing there. I would really like to help develop literacy of the scripture. And we could add to that praying as well. I know that there's a lot of people who say, I want to pray, but I don't know how to pray. Well, that's on us as the church to help you. That is not on you to just magically figure that out. And so I want to do some work to help people learn to pray and to read scripture better so that they could supplement their growth in their own personal time as well. And then finally, this is kind of a standard pastor statement, so forgive me, but I would love to see an increase in stewardship as well. The more that we have people who are willing to give of what God has given them first, the more we're able to do as the church. And we can start and begin doing more ministries when we have more people who see themselves as a vital stakeholder in our church. So I would love to see new streams of revenue by people who take the risk of tithing and giving and donating to the church so that we can continue to raise our funds, because the more funds we have, like at the end of the year, I don't get a bonus based on how much extra money we make, right? So I'm really not asking for my own personal self. The more we have people who are willing to give to help the ministry of the church, the more ministry we're able to do. And so I would love to see new people take the risk in 2019 of saying, I'm going to start somewhere by giving to the church so that we can continue to raise to help start new and better ministries. And so that's basically the idea of where I'm at. I've been listening, I've been watching, I've been trying to get to know you because I don't want to just stamp me on you. I want to see where we're at. And so that's a bit of my take of what I've seen in about 8.5 months of this place, learning who you and we are as a church. And so, again, I told you it seems appropriate to say that at the beginning of the year, but I also want to take a moment and pray a prayer with you before we come to the table of our Lord. John Wesley, who was a minister in the 1700s in England, would meet with his different small groups and have them do what was called a covenant service. And they would pray this prayer at the very end. And it's just a beautiful prayer of commitment, of all that I am, all that I have, that I give it to God, and that whatever God would see fit to do with me, I'm available. And so I'm going to read these words to you. They're going to be on the screen as well. You can follow them along. I don't want you to read them the first time because I want you to read them and mean them if you want to read and mean them. Does that make sense? So I'm going to read this prayer and just listen. Don't follow along with me. Just listen to the words. And then after I'm done, I'll give you the opportunity to pray the prayer along with me if you would like to covenant alongside. Here are these words of this prayer. I am no longer my own, but yours. Put me to what you will. Rank me with whom you will. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for you or laid aside for you, exalted for you or brought low for you. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and wholeheartedly yield all things to your pleasure and disposal. And now, glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you are mine, and I am yours. So be it. And the covenant now made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen. And so we're going to read that again as we prepare ourselves to come to the table. And if that is the prayer of your heart, I invite you to pray it along with me as I read these words again. I am no longer my own, but yours. Put me to what you will. Rank me with whom you will. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for you or laid aside for you, exalted for you or brought low for you. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and wholeheartedly yield all things to your pleasure and disposal. And now, glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you are mine and I am yours. So be it. And the covenant now made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen.